All right, let's bring in Dr. Teresa Woodruff. She's the interim president at Michigan State University, a long-time academic leader. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for this invitation.
You know, I want to begin with what's been in the news. The stories about MSU that keep coming up, from the Board of Trustees to academics and so forth. The question, though, in the minds of a lot of people is, you know, when does the bleeding stop?
Well, you know, I see MSU as a place of real strength.
Right.
And, you know, we have a new Board of Trustees, including Rima Vassar as our new chair, the first black chair of our Board of Trustees. And I see her as a strong leader, bringing us all together, really changing the narrative with the other 7 members of our Board of Trustees in a way that I think you're going to see a much different MSU. And in the meantime, while we're working really at the upper level and coming together between the President's office and the Board of Trustees, what I see as I look out across the campus is real strength.
Right.
And that which is and has always been good about MSU for its 168-year history, and in fact it's our birthday just in a couple of days.
Okay.
That has to do with teaching and learning, of research and discovery, of entrepreneurship and innovation, of ethics and honor.
Right.
All of that continues.
Right.
And that is the strength and character of the faculty, academic staff, and our support staff, and our over 50,000 students. So the story of MSU is one of strength. And I think together, we at the administration and the Board of Trustees, we're coming together in a new and positive way.
Right. And you're no stranger to this, because coming out of Northwestern to MSU, you've been a long-time academic leader with impeccable credentials. But I wonder, people looking from the outside saying, could you know, what is coming out, the internal politics and the mechanisms of it, can it be publicly damaging for MSU?
You know, I think it can be, but I think, again, the narrative of the past is one that we're putting in that past.
Right.
And we are creating the corridors of communication that really are meaningful to good decisioning. There's a lot on our ambitious agenda for Michigan State going forward, and we know the way to get there is by going together. And I think in as much as we communicate with clarity, we have transparency with trust, we believe in each other, and we move forward, I think those are the ingredients to success. And to me, I think what you're seeing out of MSU even this month are the positive attributes of an organization that believes in itself. And when we believe in ourselves, we can rise. We can bring people together. And I gave the State of the University address just a couple of weeks ago.
And it was observed as the first time in recent years that a university president
It was. And the interesting thing, and folks said as I was coming out, that they couldn't believe that we had accomplished this. And I said, yes, and in 1 year. Imagine what we can do when we have our full confidence, when we have our full leadership, all pulling in the same direction. I think this next year is going to be one of the most consequential times in the history of MSU. And if you look back over that 168 years, there's been times of discovery, there's been times of grief. There's been times when we've got it right, and there's been times when we've made a misstep. In each of those times, leaders have emerged, they've been called to service at a particular time, and they've had consequence. And I think this board is that board, and I think the administration is ready to
So
work
you think
together.
it's an ebb and flow moment you're in?
Well, I think right now we're in an upward trajectory. So, and in fact, part of why I believe that is I think from our strategic plan, our reach is beyond our current grasp. We're really looking for not just ambition. We created a strategic plan out of the depths of COVID. So we could see ourselves in the future, but now what we're doing is we're lifting our eyes up even further, and we're reaching to things that are audacious, things that only we can do together.
So let's talk about an audacious topic, the question, the role of institutions in addressing racial justice, racial equity. Public universities here in Michigan have not had the numbers in terms of diversity for black students at MSU, University of Michigan, and others have not been the most prettiest. It's been a constant battle, constant struggle. How does MSU as an institution become that significant player, a reliable player in this quest for racial justice and equity?
Well, let me talk about it in 3 ways. The first of which is I want to call out Dave Weatherspoon, who is our associate provost for admissions, and he runs admissions, the registrar office, financial aid. He, John Ambrose, and Keith Williams, who are in admissions, and our financial aid office, are all working together to ensure that we have the broadest, most diverse population of students possible. And in fact, they are longtime leaders across the state. John is here in Detroit. And they see the diversification of our population at Michigan State as one of the true goals of our strategic plan. And we're working in ways to enable students to see themselves in higher education. We've got a lot of outside forces that are saying to students, particularly here in Detroit, you may not want to go to that university. It might not be the value proposition. You might not have the job. Those are outside forces. That's not the reality of what your education can and will be if you come to Michigan State. So they are working really within the provost office with Provost Yaitzko to build the case on behalf of our students and their parents for a Michigan State education as an agent of change in their lives. The second thing we're doing is we're getting really down to the high school by high school by high school level. I call myself the recruiter in chief. And so I've been to several of our high schools across Detroit, including Cass Tech and Renaissance most recently. And the principals there are just extraordinary. And we are not just one-off with these high schools. We are embedded in the high schools. We have recruiters that are in the high school. Again, making those confident connections that are meaningful to the students moving on. I sat in a physics class at Cass Tech with an MSU alum who was graduated from our #1 physics program at Michigan State University. A lot of folks don't realize that, but we have the top physics program, and it's a very diverse program. Why? Because we've got educators from Michigan State teaching at Cass Tech a physics program to the most diverse group of learners who I want to all come to Michigan State. So making that connection directly is the second part of this. And then I think thirdly it is really the things that the governor is doing, putting more money into the educational pipeline to allow students to know that they're going to have the first dollar and the last dollar available to them. Michigan State, we put about $200 million into our financial aid packages, particularly in the southeast part of the state. And those are dollars of changed lives. And that's going to start a generational change.
So what do you see, what do you think needs to happen though to increase the black student population, to increase minority population? You talk about that, you broke down the tentacles, but what do you need to do to increase those numbers? So at the end of the day, we see those numbers increase.
So my hope is that by being embedded in the high schools, and then the last thing that I would say is that we're building a new generation of ways of learning. And I've just come from the Detroit Apple MSU Academy that is right here in the middle of Detroit. And we have 200 students, largely black, but a very diverse group of learners from Detroit, all doing coding and networking and thinking in new ways. These are educational outcomes where we're evolving what it means to have a degree type. And these students have a lot of opportunities. Some of them actually came from MSU into the Coding Academy. Some of them are on their way to MSU. Some of them are on their way to being the next entrepreneur and leading the state of Michigan. I see that as the way in which we will continue to develop a new way of the on-ramp to not just higher ed, but an on-ramp to a way of thinking about yourself in the world. And I think as we, the metrics of success are the numbers of students that have come through the program, the number of hours, the number of apps developed. We're going to have a new app for the Eastern market, so more equitably you can find different vendors across that big and wonderful part of the Detroit landscape. But more importantly, not just those proximal metrics of success, but we're going to see the outcomes of this played out in the lives of the families of those who've gone through the academy over the next generation. And we have to think in that way. We have to think about the entire ecosystem of what it is to enable the best outcomes for the broadest population
right.
of folks.
And since you talk about family, we do have great inequality here in the state of Michigan. You know, and you know, the numbers bear it out. You know, I think about places like Detroit. You've talked about what you're doing. I think about places like Benton Harbor, Flint, all across the state, and even in rural Michigan. You know, I think poverty, economic inequality is a common denominator that binds, you know, both black and white.
Right.
The question though for families, for students who are coming, you know, from disadvantaged families, is the door open for them at MSU?
The door is wide open. So we have opened the door the widest that we can to allow the broadest number of entrants to come into our classrooms.
Right.
And we've been evolving the classroom setting at MSU so that we are organized ourselves in order to meet the needs of the students.
And I asked that question against the backdrop of an active U.S. Supreme Court case against affirmative action, but go ahead.
Yes, and so we are working in the broadest sense, and we're working actually in those communities as well. In Detroit, I talk about the Appleton Academy, but we're also partnered with Henry Ford Health, bringing students into the healthcare environment here. In Flint, we've been working in water, bringing new dollars from the federal government there. In Lansing, we have new dollars for childcare through our Child Care Development Lab. In Benton Harbor, I was there just a couple of, 8 weeks ago, visiting with farmers on their land, learning what is going on in today's environment. So being in all these places and spaces where Michigan State is, through extension and just through the breadth of the way we touch every one of the 83 counties of this incredible state, we're making the case that a Michigan State education is right for Michiganders, no matter your background. And we are tailoring the environment to allow you to take advantage of that environment. And we've actually changed the way in which we recruit. Instead of saying, well, what's your major? We're asking students, what's your mission? We're saying, when you come to Michigan State, tell us what your mission is in life, and we'll help you find that major that will fit that mission. And we think even just that change in nomenclature changes the relationship for every student to the learning that they will have.
And I think in that segment, the way you laid it out, it's a nice segue to the conversation also about how institutions are being forced to redesign or redefine their mission. In the era of this national racial justice, racial equity, we saw what happened with Tyree Nichols in Memphis, Tennessee. We saw what happened to Patrick Leoya in Grand Rapids and so forth, and other places around the country. And I just want you to step back. As an institutional leader, though, what does all of this mean? This bustling to the top of this racial reckoning, and people are pointing the finger at institutions to say, step up and do something.
Right, and I think just yesterday, our Faculty Senate Chairperson, Karen Kelly Blake, made a clarion call to action to all of us. She said, the time for thoughts and prayers are over. We need to take steps here in Michigan to make sure that that we can bring the full measure of our university against these social problems. And she is readily right, and we're all hearing that call. And very specifically, Marlon Lynch, who is our police chief and chief of safety, public safety for the university, has already been engaged on the national scene, and he will continue to work with us locally, as is Vinnie Gore, who's the head of our student life and engagement, making sure that he's creating the ways in which students can become engaged in engineering their environment so that it isn't that which we find ourselves in today. So we're very proactive, we're very activist oriented, and we're working in every way we can to engineer the environment based on the fact that we have students who are coming to us to learn, to develop their way of thinking, to develop their network, to develop a sense of ethics and honor, and a sense of the ability to go and get things done. And that's what we hope the imprint is.
And the environment has to be conducive for them, where they're not only find a sense of achievement, but also they find inclusion, they feel a sense of belonging.
That's right, and so we just finished, and Vinnie Gore, our Vice President for Student Life and Engagement, just completed a survey of all of our students. And the sense of belonging across all categories, across all demographics, across first, second, third, and fourth year, across SES, these students have a very high sense of belonging, a 5.8 or 5.9 out of 6. And what that says to me is that through the neighborhood programs that Vinnie and his team have developed, so people find within a large organization, a large and vibrant organization, they find their neighborhoods. And then no matter what's happening around them, They put their warm, welcoming MSU arms around each other. So instead of other, we have a sense of each other. And to me, it is that organic belonging, those numbers that represent the people who have found ways to learn and to understand that bringing together is the best way to live. And I hope that goes much broader than MSU.
Yeah. So let's as we wind this, let's look at the long-term sustainability and the viability of the institution against the stories that have come up. I mean, you've made the case here for what the university is. You've given us an idea into the anatomy of the internal workings of the programs and so forth. But the long-term viability and sustainability of the university in terms of, are we going to be, is it going to be every other year there's an interim president, every other year there's a new president? I mean, talk about the long-term viability and sustainability here.
Well, my belief,
or is that a question for the Board of Trustees?
I think for the board, but I think what we're doing on the everyday levels, we're creating a sense of what I call stagility. I made up a new word, stability plus agility.
Okay.
So for the moment, I'm the current president. I'm the president today and maybe tomorrow and maybe the next day. So during that time, we're going to build those kinds of programs and decisions that are consequential to what's right for MSU. We've been here 168 years. We're going to be here another 168 years. We were just awarded a century bond through Lisa Frace, our chief financial officer. What the bond market said is that we are a good investment. We're going to be here for another century, and with certainty we will be serving the broadest, most diverse group of Michiganders that we possibly can, and changing and lifting up the state as we do so.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Woodruff, for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Teresa Woodruff, the interim president at Michigan State University. We'll be right back with more on Sunday Nation. Stay with us.